What's going on, everyone? It is I, the Conservative Christian, coming back at you with another video. Finally, so here's what's been going on with me. So, a lot's been going on with me actually. What it comes down to is that life has been pretty crazy. I finally have a full-time job. And in case you guys haven't noticed, you guys are back in your spot that you normally are. And if I'm lucky, let me turn this noise off in the background here. And if you're lucky, this not only looks but sounds better than my previous videos. That is because I finally got a new phone, thanks to my new job. So I'm able to do this again. So here we go. Now, before I start this video off, I have a thing recorded for the whole Brett Kavanaugh and Christine Ford situation. I have come to the realization that there is no way that I'm going to be able to make a short video from that. That it's too long. And so I am going to be posting that video soon. I'm going to refilm it because I think I have all my talking points finally figured out after recording it like 5 times. And I'm going to have to separate it into 2 separate videos, and I think I know how I'm going to do that. So, but because I forgot that today was Columbus Day, I figured that I would talk about this one because I know that I can make this a short video. So let's jump into it, shall we? In 1842, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Something like that, I don't know. So I want to talk about this today because I've been seeing a lot of posts on Facebook talking about how, you know, it's KKK Columbus Day, some woman giving the middle finger saying F Christopher Columbus, you know, the typical left-wing stuff. And so I figured now's a better time to talk about this than any other time. These things are really chewy. I get it, guys, okay? It's unprofessional as crap to eat while you're making a video. I'm done. Let me just finish chewing and I'll be good. This thing's really chewy. Anyway, so one of my favorite YouTubers has come out with a video today discussing the history of Columbus Day and how everything came about to be, and some of the lies that are perpetuated by the left to attack Christopher Columbus. Here's the thing. I don't disagree with all of their statements, or some of them. But the context here matters. See, the left only gets it half right. They say things that are at face value true, but again, context, aka reality, is their enemy. And they can't debate against reality. Here's what I mean by that. So I reposted the YouTuber's thing onto my thread. I started talking to people about it. It was Steven Crowder's video. And one of my friends, first of all, started off with a ad hominem disguise. It was a very implicatory, where he stated, you know, because someone posted that video of the woman sticking the finger and saying F Christopher Columbus, and of course me doing the thing that I do, I said thank God for Christopher Columbus, and then I posted a little emoji of the American flag. And one of my friends on Facebook, who is friends with the person whose post I posted on, said, you know, do you go to school or something like that? And, you know, implying that because I haven't gone to school that somehow I can't possibly know what the heck I'm talking about. It was funny too because then he proceeded to say that I am a mouthpiece for Steven Crowder when he decided to post a source of his own to supposedly defend or support his position that he never even explained in the first place as to exactly what he was trying to say. So I think he meant well, to be fair. He just doesn't like the fact that I post a lot of Steven Crowder videos because I think it's because a lot of the things that Steven Crowder says is true. And I just feed off of those videos to make my own arguments. He then proceeded to say that he wishes that, you know, I asked him, well, why are you insinuating that, you know, why are you insinuating this motive on me? Is it because I disagree with you? And he's like, no, because I think that you're a mouthpiece for Steven Crowder and you should think for yourself. So because I use a source, aka Steven Crowder, as a springboard to hopefully engage and get people to discuss the topic of the day, he then somehow translates that into me saying that because I use a source for argumentation, that I'm not thinking for myself, to which I immediately proved him wrong on that on every single front, which I'm going to talk to you guys about today. And so I just thought it was kind of funny that, you know, okay, yes, I do post a lot of Steven Crowder videos, right? But it doesn't matter how much or how little you post a source. You have to base your argument off of something. And to say that because I use Steven Crowder as my talking point for the things that I choose to believe in, and then saying that because I do that I don't think for myself, well, what does that say about you? I'm sure you use a lot of sources, you know, to support your arguments. So what are you also saying then that you're just a mouthpiece for the sources that you post? Because I don't see you not referencing something to support your argument. So fallacy of some kind there. I don't know what it is, but it's just, if you're watching this, you're silly. You're being silly. So continuing off of that, the video that you should watch it. Steven Crowder did it. It's about Columbus Day. It's the newest one. It should be out. Depending on when you're watching this video, it's out within the last 24 hours, 48, whatever, 72,000 hours. He debunked a lot of the myths, you know, about how Christopher Columbus was the incarnate of Satan and that he was just inherently evil. You know, the things that he did when he came to what he thought was, I think it was Asia. I'm bad at history. All these things that he did, but then in the grander context of it, there were other Indians who were also savage, they were savages, and that Indians actually ended up teaming up with Christopher Columbus to fight those Indians, but apparently also Christopher Columbus also owned, he took some of them in as slaves forcibly, obviously a bad thing, but here's the point to their point. Here's where they're right? Like, the thing with the left is that they only focus on negatives. They only focus on the flaws in human beings, and again, they don't take the entirety of the context into consideration when making their dumb arguments. What I mean by that is, given the context of the day and age that Christopher Columbus existed in, people owning other people as slaves wasn't abnormal. It wasn't uncommon. I mean, heck, whenever Christopher Columbus came to the New World, there were tribes of Indians that were doing arguably worse things than enslaving other Indians, and that was cannibalism. There were people across the entire world that were doing evil things, worse things than Christopher Columbus. And to clear the record, the majority of the Indians that died as a result of Christopher Columbus showing up was because of diseases, new diseases that were introduced to these natives that lived off of the land as, you know, cavemen essentially, that their immune systems were not used used to these kinds of diseases. So most of them ended up dying. And I don't have an actual source document of this yet, but I have heard in some specific instances that when Christopher Columbus, being a God-fearing man, came to the New World, maybe not God-fearing, but he believed in God, that the Indians that were exposed to these diseases, ones that chose to stay within certain areas of the camps that were more saturated with more religious people, these people became immune to the diseases. Now, obviously, you guys know that I believe in God, and if you take this concept, you take this aspect, and you apply it to the Bible in the sense of in the Old Testament, where when people were wandering around in the desert and they were getting bit by snakes, that they created a pole that if they were ever bitten, they looked at the pole and they wouldn't die from the poison. It's a very similar concept. It's a very interesting topic that I'll probably talk about at another time. But that was a side note. Coming back now to what I was talking about. So the thing is that the left tends to look at history through the lens of today. And I think that is a dumb thing to do, because again, you have to take in context. Look, obviously I get it. We all agree that slavery should never have existed and that it shouldn't exist, but just because it shouldn't exist doesn't mean that because it did at one point, that context is somehow irrelevant in this. And it is relevant. I'm not saying that what Christopher Columbus did in regards to how he treated certain people was right. I'm talking entirety. Let me continue and I'll explain. So Christopher Columbus came, he enslaved some, he teamed up with others. There's two sides, right? But again, the left only wants to paint him in a negative light. Well, what about all the good that came out of this, right? What about the fact that because Christopher Columbus discovered America, that we now live in the nation that he discovered today? We live because of his bravery, being the person, the most sophisticated navigationalist sailor. I don't even know if that's a word. Navigationalist. He was praised for his time because he had courage to do what people were afraid to do. This was at a time when people believed that the earth was flat, that there were sea monsters, all of these things floating around. But Christopher Columbus said, I'll do it. I'll go out and I'll go find this land that we speak of. And he had the brass to go out and actually discover with only 3 ships. And in the context of that time in history, all of this matters, again, because here's the thing. A lot of people want to, say, they only want to point to all the bad things that Christopher Columbus did. And in fact, one of the, an analogy that, what's the word? Not hyperbolic. I can't remember the word. A fake instance, for example, that a friend gave was that. He said. So what you're basically saying is that if a rapist, if someone existed who was a rapist, but he also discovered the cure for cancer, then hypothetical. That's what it was. Then then what do you make of that, basically? And I said that's the point that I'm trying to make, is that I'm not saying that we can't highlight the good and the bad in a person, but the only thing that the left does is they highlight the bad. But again, here's the thing. If you want to use that analogy, the way that you would have to word it in order for it to be contextually and culturally appropriate and parallel to that time frame that Christopher Columbus existed would be, so what you're saying is that one of the rapists that exist at the time frame decided to stop raping and then because he did these things, he decided to he also found the cure for cancer. Because here's the reality, right? And I use this as an example. Take someone like Abraham Lincoln, for example. This guy, a guy who actually owned slaves. However, in the full context of Abraham Lincoln's life, slavery was the norm, and Abraham Lincoln was the one. Yes, he owned slaves, but he was the one to sign the Bill of Rights, to sign a document to abolish slavery. He was the Christopher Columbus of his day for making people free. Just like Christopher Columbus in his day was the catalyst for making exploring more of a thing, making navigation more of a thing, and it eventually led to the colonization and the product that we know today as the United States of America. Just like Abraham Lincoln was the catalyst to not only abolish slavery in America and free people who had been wrongfully enslaved for their lives for centuries, but that was also the catalyst to which the rest of the world decided to abolish slavery. We did it first. And in context, it took more bravery for people like Christopher Columbus and Abraham Lincoln to go against the grain, because they were the underdogs of their time. Slavery was a norm back in the day of Christopher Columbus and Abraham Lincoln. So sure, both people owned slaves, they mistreated people as slaves, but in the grand scheme of things, they changed their ways, and as a result, something good came out of that. To me, that's a lot more important than getting hung up on the fact that these people were slave owners or that they might have done a couple of bad things. Because in the scope of today, how much bravery does it really take for someone to come out and say that slavery is wrong? And that should be the fact that we can say that today, the fact that we can look back on history and just point to something as obvious as Christopher Columbus owning slaves and saying that was a dumb thing of him to do, that was bad of him to do, I think does, at least at the very least, it proves to us as a society how much we've progressed. But when you take in context, when you take in the culture of the time, what these people did was brave. And sure, no, it wasn't right, obviously, but how much harder is it? Let's say you're Abraham Lincoln, where you live in a time where slavery is the norm. And yes, you own slaves. And that would honestly make the decision harder for me if I was that person at the time to say, you know what I'm doing is wrong. And even though I can't fix what I've done in the past, I'm going to start today by not only demanding more of myself as a person, but demanding this from the rest of the people by making this a law that everyone must follow under the punishment of, the judicial system. I think that it speaks more volume. It speaks louder for someone of their time who was probably laughed at, like Christopher Columbus. He was probably laughed at and mocked for even having a dream, for even saying that I'm going to find this place, I'm going to sail the ocean, I'm going to conquer, I'm going to do these things. For Abraham Lincoln to say, you know what we're doing is wrong, and I'm going to fix it. This man probably got death threats because of saying that and for doing that, as was made evident by the bullet that he caught with his head. I think that people like that the context in the history of what happened at that time, and the fact that these people literally had the courage and the bravery to fight against their human nature, to make the right decision in the face of fear, speaks more volumes of bravery than it does the people today who weren't paying attention in their history class, saying that simply because Christopher Columbus owned a few slaves, that he's just an inherently evil person. When in the grand scheme of things, in the grand context, when you take everything into account, Christopher Columbus at that time was no different than most people. In fact, the one thing that made him stand out the most was the fact that he was the one to have the balls to go out and risk his own life to hopefully make his nation better. That's the point in all of this. And I don't understand how people in America today can make Columbus Day to be out this thing that it's simply not. That, if you supported Christopher Columbus, if you liked Christopher Columbus, then you're a racist, genocidal, whatever the case may be. When in the context of that time, there was just as much attempted genocide on one end as there was the other. But there's even evidence to suggest that the people that Christopher Columbus even attacked in the first place, some people that he did fight against, not only was he better equipped to fight these people, which is why the numbers reflected the way that they did, but that these people were legitimate savages who were going around eating other Indians simply because they weren't part of their tribe. I think it's ridiculous that I'm supposed to feel bad about the America that I live in. Okay, benefit of the doubt, right? This is something that I love to do. I love to give the left side the benefit of the doubt, because at every single turn I can pick apart the left's argument and still make it work in my favor. Again, I think truth can stand on its own. It can stand on its own 2 feet. I don't think that I need to explain it, but I can definitely prove that it can stand on its own 2 feet, regardless of which way you want to try and spin the truth, or lies against the truth. So let's say that everything that I just said is wrong, right? Let's say that Christopher Columbus was this person that the left paints him out to be. Let's say that Abraham Lincoln was the person that he was made out to be. Guess what? We still have an America. We still have free people. We have people who are no longer bound to work against their will. We no longer have to worry about living in a society that doesn't have the same rights that arguably we wouldn't have at this point in time had Christopher Columbus not discovered this land. Here's the reality. People like to backtrack and say, well, what if we didn't actually win this war? What if we can play that game? And if that's the game that you want to play, arguably, you could be living right now under a German dictatorship where you'd be speaking German, your life would be dictated to you, you'd be told how to live, how to act, and if you thought or spoke the wrong way, then you'd probably be killed or something of the sort. Given the fact that America was the first nation to abolish slavery, arguably, if Christopher Columbus had not discovered America and that we had colonized it, we would very arguably still be living in a society where people were slaves. So this is where I'm going to tie theology into all this, and I'm going to be done with this video. See, here's the thing. People said that God doesn't exist and that he's not real. Fair enough. Okay, I understand the arguments for why you don't believe. Here's what I'm saying. I think it's too coincidental for people out there who, not perfect, myself included, no one is perfect. That's something that for some reason people don't seem to want to understand. I don't know how they don't understand. People are not perfect. They do dumb things. They make stupid decisions. Like Abraham Lincoln, like Christopher Columbus. But one thing that all these people had in common was that they believed in God. And I find that it's too coincidental that throughout history, people who have believed in God have essentially paved the way for the world that it is today. Christopher Columbus was someone who professed to believe in God. Because of him, he found the America that we know today, right? So the nation was founded some years later. Okay, now slavery was a thing. Because of Abraham Lincoln, a man who believed in God, slavery was abolished. Do you see the trend here? Whether you believe in God or not, I think that it's highly improbable that this is just a series of coincidences that have been happening in order to better the world. Because we abolished slavery, because Christopher Columbus found the United States of America, and that we expanded on that, and then that we abolished slavery, and then that caused the rest of the world to abolish slavery. That is too much of a coincidence for me to say that for me to just simply cross it off that, yep, Christopher Columbus was inherently evil. Everything that he ever did in his entire life was the work of the devil, and that you know, if I think that he had anything to do with making the world a better place, that makes me a terrible person. I don't follow that rationale at all. That's pretty much what I have to say about this. I'm not going to be tricked or convinced into thinking that because I don't subscribe to the mentality and the thought process that the left has, that somehow makes me some sort of a bad person for supporting a man who literally was the catalyst, was the conduit for everything, all of these big issues that have now equaled themselves out with time, that have made the world a better place. I'm not saying that every part of the world is a good place, but it has gotten better, with obviously the exception of the Islamic world. Well, at least some parts of it anyways. That's a different subject. I'm trying not to get too much off topic. Don't let people, don't let people boss you around and tell you how to think. You know, like, I'm getting sick and tired of people saying dumb things like, oh, you know, it's not Columbus Day, it's Indigenous Peoples Day, it's whatever the freak the non-microaggression word of the day is that doesn't offend the next person. Say what you want to say, but no, at the very least, be able to articulate why it is that you believe in what you believe in. Because here's what I can say for darn sure right now, that my friend who I talked to on Facebook, he didn't have an argument. All he said was, I don't like the way you think. I don't like that you post Steven Crowder videos. Here's a source. I think you should think for yourself. That's basically all he said. Meanwhile, I'm writing paragraphs to this guy as to why I not only think that he's wrong, but why I believe in what I believe in. They don't have an argument. They don't even know why they believe what they believe in, other than because someone else told them to believe in that. Which is fine. You're entitled to your own opinion, but that doesn't mean that your opinion is right. And when your argument for why you're right comes down to you're right because X and Y said so, that's not a valid argument. And even in this case, if you want to make that argument against me, I'm not saying anything different than what the history books reflect. So in conclusion, I don't care if I offend anyone because I have thought things through and you have decided not to. Happy Columbus Day.